Washington, D.C., 1951. The CIA has a problem. Every agent they send into the Soviet Union is being captured or killed. Every operation they plan seems to be compromised before it begins. Every network they build behind the Iron Curtain is being rolled up within weeks. Someone is talking. Someone with access to the most classified secrets in the Western world is passing them directly to Moscow. The CIA launches an internal investigation. They look everywhere. They never think to look in London. In a quiet office in MI6 headquarters, a senior British intelligence officer is reading the CIA's investigation report. He knows exactly what they are looking for. He knows because he is the one they are looking for. His name is Harold Adrian Russell Philby. Everyone calls him Kim. He is one of the most trusted intelligence officers in the Western world. He has been spying for the Soviet Union since 1934. He will not be caught for another 12 years. And by the time he is, the damage he has done will be almost impossible to fully calculate. This is the story of Kim Philby, the most devastating spy in the history of the Cold War. To understand how Kim Philby became the most damaging spy in the history of the Cold War, you first have to understand who he was and where he came from. Harold Adrian Russell Philby was born on January 1, 1912 in Ambala, India, then part of the British Empire. His father was Harry St. John Bridger Philby, a famous British explorer and Arabist who converted to Islam and became an advisor to the Saudi royal family. Kim grew up in the shadow of a brilliant and unconventional father. He attended Westminster School and then Trinity College, Cambridge, one of the most prestigious educational institutions in the world. Cambridge in the early 1930s was a place of intense political debate. The Great Depression was devastating economies across the world. Fascism was rising in Germany and Spain. Many young idealistic students at Cambridge looked at the world around them and concluded that capitalism had failed. That communism was the answer. That the Soviet Union represented the future of humanity. Kim Philby was one of them. He was recruited as a Soviet agent while still at Cambridge. In 1934, he was 22 years old, and he would spend the next 29 years of his life pretending to be something he was not. Philby's Soviet handlers gave him instructions that were as clever as they were patient. Do not rush. Do not take risks. Build your cover perfectly. Become exactly the kind of man that British intelligence trusts most. So Philby did something counterintuitive for a committed communist. He publicly pretended to support fascism. He traveled to Spain during the Spanish Civil War as a journalist. He covered the war from the Franco side. He cultivated relationships with fascist officers and officials. He won awards for his journalism. He even received a decoration from Franco himself. All of it designed to make him appear as far from communist sympathies as possible. It worked perfectly. When World War II began, Philby was recruited into MI6 British Secret Intelligence Service. His background appeared impeccable. His politics appeared reliably right-wing. He was charming, intelligent, well-connected. He rose through MI6 with extraordinary speed. By 1944, he was head of the Soviet counterintelligence section of MI6. The man responsible for catching Soviet spies in Britain was himself a Soviet spy. The irony was so complete it was almost elegant, and his Soviet handlers could not have been more pleased. Philby was not working alone. He was part of a network of Cambridge-educated British intelligence officers who had all been recruited as Soviet agents in the 1930s. They became known as the Cambridge Five: Guy Burgess, Donald MacLean, Anthony Blunt, John Cairncross, and Kim Philby. 5 men from the most privileged backgrounds in Britain, 5 men who had attended the finest schools and universities, 5 men who had been given every advantage that British society could offer, and 5 men who had decided that the system which had given them everything was fundamentally wrong. Together they represented the most damaging espionage network in the history of British intelligence. MacLean had access to American nuclear secrets and passed them to Moscow. Burgess had access to Foreign Office communications. Blunt worked in MI5 and passed counterintelligence information to the Soviets. Cairncross had access to Ultra, the decoded German communications that were one of the most closely guarded secrets of World War II. And Philby had access to everything, because Philby ran the department responsible for catching people exactly like himself. The damage Kim Philby did to Western intelligence is almost impossible to fully quantify. But here are some of the things historians have been able to establish. Operation Valuable. In 1949, Britain and America jointly planned to infiltrate agents into Albania to destabilize the communist government there. Philby knew about the operation in detail. Every agent sent into Albania was captured or killed. The operation was a complete disaster. The agents who died had been betrayed before they even landed. Operation Gold. a joint CIA and MI6 operation to tunnel under the Soviet sector of Berlin and tap Soviet military communications. Philby told the Soviets about it before the tunnel was even completed. The Soviets allowed the operation to continue for nearly a year to avoid revealing their source, but they fed false information through the tapped communications. He burned agent networks in Eastern Europe. He compromised planned defections. He identified Western agents operating inside the Soviet Union. He was also serving as MI6 liaison to American intelligence in Washington, D.C., which meant the CIA trusted him with their most classified operations. And every one of those operations went directly to Moscow. The human cost was men and women who were arrested, tortured, executed, because Kim Philby told Moscow their names. The first real crack in Philby's cover appeared in 1951. American and British intelligence had been working to decode Soviet communications from the 1940s. A program called the Venona Project. The decoded messages revealed that there was a Soviet agent inside the British embassy in Washington, D.C. during World War II. The evidence pointed to Donald Maclean, one of the Cambridge Five. Philby knew immediately that Maclean was about to be exposed. He warned him. He used Guy Burgess, another Cambridge Five member who was living with Philby in Washington, to get a warning to Maclean in London. Burgess and Maclean fled to the Soviet Union in May 1951. The disappearance of two senior British diplomats caused an international sensation. And now suspicion began to fall on the people who had known them, including Kim Philby. Philby was recalled to London. He was interrogated by MI5, but he was brilliant under interrogation, calm, cooperative, offering plausible explanations for everything. He denied everything, and without a confession or definitive proof, MI5 could not make a case against him. He was asked to resign from MI6 quietly, given a financial settlement, but he was not arrested. Not yet. Despite being asked to resign from MI6, Kim Philby's story did not end in 1951. In an extraordinary decision that tells you everything about how the British establishment protected its own, MI6 eventually sent Philby to Beirut in Lebanon as a journalist, which served as cover for him continuing to work as an intelligence asset. He was still passing information to the Soviets. In Beirut, he rebuilt his life. He drank heavily. He had relationships. He continued his work from Moscow. But the net was closing. Nicholas Elliott, one of Philby's oldest friends in MI6, was sent to Beirut in January 1963 with new evidence against him. Elliott confronted Philby directly. He offered him a deal. Confess. Cooperate. Give us what you know. In return, Britain would not prosecute him publicly. Philby appeared to agree. He gave Elliott a partial confession. And then, before the deal could be formalized and before he could be brought back to London, Philby disappeared. On January 23, 1963, Kim Philby boarded a Soviet freighter in Beirut harbor and defected to Moscow. He was never coming back. Kim Philby arrived in Moscow in January 1963. He was 50 years old. He had spent half his life pretending to be someone he was not. And now he was finally in the country he had served for 30 years. What he found was not the workers' paradise he had imagined at Cambridge. Moscow in 1963 was gray and cold and bureaucratic. The Soviet Union was nothing like the idealistic vision that had inspired a generation of young Cambridge students in the 1930s. Philby was given an apartment, a pension, a role advising Soviet intelligence on Western methods. But he was also effectively a prisoner. He could not travel freely. He was monitored. The Soviets were never entirely sure how much of what he told them was genuine and how much might be disinformation. The relationship between a spy and the intelligence service he served was never one of complete trust. He drank heavily. He was profoundly lonely. He missed England. In one of the great ironies of his story, the man who had devoted his life to the Soviet cause ended up spending his final years homesick for the country he had betrayed. He died in Moscow on May 11, 1988. He was 76 years old. It is easy to tell Kim Philby's story as a story about espionage tradecraft, about cover stories and dead drops and clever interrogations survived. But that framing misses the most important part. People died because of Kim Philby. Agents sent into Albania were captured and executed. Western networks built behind the Iron Curtain were rolled up and the people in them were imprisoned and killed. Men and women who had agreed to risk their lives for the West went into Soviet-controlled territory believing they had the protection of Western intelligence. They did not, because Kim Philby had already told Moscow they were coming. The exact number of deaths directly attributable to Philby is impossible to establish. Intelligence agencies do not keep those records in ways that are easily accessible, but historians estimate that dozens of agents were killed as a direct result of his betrayals, possibly hundreds real people with families. with lives, with everything to lose. Who trusted the system that Kim Philby had corrupted from the inside? That is the part of the Kim Philby story that his admirers, and he had admirers, tend to leave out. Here is the power play and twisted truth at the heart of Kim Philby's story. The British establishment built its intelligence services on the assumption that men of the right background could be trusted absolutely. Cambridge educated, well connected, the right clubs, the right family. These were the qualifications that opened the doors of MI6. Not rigorous vetting, not psychological assessment, not the kind of deep background investigation that might have found what Philby was hiding, just class. Just background, just the comfortable assumption that men like us do not betray men like us. Kim Philby understood that assumption perfectly, and he used it as his greatest weapon. The power play is this. British intelligence trusted Philby because of everything he appeared to be. The twisted truth is this. Everything he appeared to be was a performance he had been giving since 1934. The most damaging spy in Cold War history was not discovered through brilliant counterintelligence work. He was never truly caught at all. He chose to leave, on his own terms, on a Soviet freighter in Beirut harbor, after 30 years, and he took most of his secrets with him to Moscow, where they stayed. Kim Philby died in Moscow on May 11, 1988. He was 76 years old. He was buried with full honors by the KGB, the Soviet intelligence service he had served for half his life. His face appeared on a Soviet postage stamp. He was given the rank of KGB general posthumously. The Soviet Union celebrated him as a hero. Britain remembered him as its greatest traitor. Both of those things were true. He gave interviews in his Moscow years. He wrote a memoir called My Silent War. He was unrepentant. He believed until the end that what he had done was right, that the Soviet Union represented a better future for humanity, that his betrayal of Britain was a higher loyalty to an idea. He was wrong about the Soviet Union. He was wrong about the better future. But he never admitted it. History's Wildside is about power plays and twisted truths. And here is the final twisted truth of Kim Philby's story. The man who did more damage to Western intelligence than any other single individual in the Cold War was not a master of disguise or a brilliant technical operative. He was a man who understood one simple thing. The most effective cover is not a fake identity. It is a real one. He was exactly who he appeared to be: privileged, charming, Cambridge educated, perfectly at home in the corridors of British intelligence. He just had a second life that none of them ever saw. Subscribe to History's Wildside for a new story every Sunday. Power plays, twisted truths, and the moments that history almost forgot. This has been History's Wildside. I will see you next Sunday.